Hello, and welcome to CRPS Contender, my complex regional pain syndrome education channel. Today we'll be discussing the Valencia consensus and taking another step down our journal journey regarding the ICD-11 and the Budapest Criteria. The paper we'll be discussing is titled The Valencia Consensus-Based Adaption of the International Association of the Study of Pain, Complex Regional Pain Syndrome Diagnostic Criteria. It was written by a group of CRPS specialists who met in September of 2019, and this paper was published March 15, 2021 in the journal Pain. This special interest group met to discuss, review, and reach a consensus regarding perceived ambiguities in the diagnostic tool, the Budapest Criteria, and to create pragmatic updates to these assessment instructions. The wording of the criteria themselves was not altered to avoid invalidating the criteria. These updates were included in the new International Classification of Diseases version 11 regarding CRPS and its diagnosis, and this came into effect the 1st of January 2022. There were three primary areas that were changed, and the first was changes in the diagnostic parenting in the ICD-11. In the ICD-10, CRPS's parent classification was focal or segmental autonomic disorders. Other diagnoses included under that parent classification were under or overproduction of tears, abnormal pupillary movements, Horner syndrome of the eye, unilateral headaches, other specified and unspecified focal segmental autonomic disorders. The special interest group that met in Valencia decided that this was not the appropriate area for it to be classified, and the Autonomic Society agreed, and so in the ICD-11, they moved it to a new parent classification, which did not exist in previous ICDs, and this is called chronic primary pain. Chronic primary pain is a new diagnosis parental classification that utilizes the biopsychosocial model of health. You might have heard me talk about that before on this channel. Other diagnoses included in this parent classification are chronic primary visceral pain, chronic widespread pain, chronic primary musculoskeletal pain, chronic primary headache or orofacial pain, CRPS, other specified and unspecified chronic primary pains. All of the chronic primary pains are characterized by significant emotional distress or functional disability. They are multifactorial and have biological, psychological, and social factors which contribute to the pain syndrome. The next major section that was updated in the ICD-11 were changes in CRPS subtypes. You are probably all familiar with CRPS type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is without verified nerve injury and type 2 is with verified nerve injury. In CRPS type 2, symptoms must extend beyond any identified injured nerve territory because the injured nerve itself could cause those things without it being CRPS. Additionally, the diagnostic signs of type 1 and type 2 are identical, and so the relevance of these two subgroups is still unclear. They created a third subtype, CRPS with remission of some features. This is for people who have previously fully met the Budapest criteria, but currently have insufficient features to fully meet the diagnostic criteria. It's important to note that reduction in symptoms does not necessarily mean an improved lived experience for the patient, and the individual may not have improved pain, and they are usually not symptom-free. Necessarily, this overlaps with type 1 or type 2 because this is when CRPS is somewhat managed. CRPS not otherwise specified is retained exclusively for people who have never fully met the CRPS diagnostic criteria, but for whom no other diagnosis better explains their clinical features. Warm and cold or early and persistent are overlapping presentations of CRPS and are not formal subtypes. However, clinical reports should include this information to track the transition of CRPS from an early or acute stage to a persistent ischemic dominant stage of CRPS. They also have put forward the term persistent as being preferred for prolonged intractable CRPS over chronic due to the implications of just greater than 3 months and the use of chronic across various pain conditions. And then the third is clarification of diagnostic procedure. This is particularly relevant for clinicians. All patients should be asked systematically about all symptoms in the criteria at each formal diagnostic evaluation due to the fluctuation of symptoms over time. Asymmetry unilaterally, which is where it's just on one side of the body, should be compared to the unaffected side. Asymmetry bilaterally, which is in both sides of the body, is compared to an unaffected limb or the limbs of a typical healthy individual. In spread of CRPS, and I am so glad that they are acknowledging that CRPS does spread. If you would like more on this, please see my previous video. In the spread of CRPS, the full diagnostic criteria must be applied to each limb individually. The extension of pain alone in the absence of other CRPS features is insufficient to be considered spread. This is not uncommon for pain to spread. It is also called referred pain. Other symptoms must be present for CRPS to be considered spreading. When testing for hyperalgesia, a single pinprick in the center of the most affected region versus an identical pinprick on a corresponding location of an unaffected limb or an equivalent control site in bilateral cases. Hyperalgesia is considered positive if the pain is more intense or lasts longer in the affected area. For allodynia, this is tested with a light touch, vibration, warm or cool temperature, deep tissue or joint pressure or joint movement. Only one of these is required for allodynia to be present. The individual's body temperature asymmetry should be obvious to the back of the examiner's hand. There should be obvious color asymmetry, and the nature of that color should be specified, whether that's red, blue, pale, mottled, or etc. All of those clarifications have been applied to the ICD-11. This next one has not, but they need to find a solution for it, and that has been noted in their paper. In some cases, objective CRPS signs may be observed by an examiner without the patient reporting a corresponding subjective symptom. Patients may not be able to feel temperature changes, or see color changes or swelling due to vision issues or other issues. In these cases, common sense says signs override symptoms, but this cannot automatically apply due to the statistical methods which validated the Budapest Criteria. A pragmatic solution must be found to this problem in which common sense prevails. In conclusion, it is hoped that the modified ICD-11 text clarifies important pragmatic aspects of CRPS assessment and diagnosis, and that it will enhance the usability of these criteria in both clinical and research settings. All changes and clarification marked with a hashtag have already been incorporated into the ICD-11 CRPS text and should be applied to CRPS diagnostic process immediately. Future research should clarify 1. Whether CRPS types 1 and type 2 are indeed separate entities or if they are better merged. 2. Whether introduction of further subgroups such as warm-cold or early persistent CRPS is useful, for example for predicting treatment responses. 3. Ascertain the utility of biomarkers for supporting clinical CRPS diagnosis. And 4. Define resolved CRPS. If you'd like to support my work, I have a Patreon or a PayPal. I also now have a website, crpscontender.com. Thank you very much, Emily Malcontent and W. for Shep, for your continued support. If you'd like to see this paper or my notes or other supporting resources that I used in this video, relevant sources are linked in the description. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you next time.